The Thousand Suns have some of the most recognizable characters in Space Marines out in 40k. Many know about the story of Magnus and his sons. We have the side where Magnus did nothing wrong, versus the other side where many believe Magnus is an arrogant idiot. There is a lot to talk about when it comes to the 15th Legion because they are that complex. And in this video, I'm going to discuss the things that make the Thousand Suns enjoyable and one of the best written legions. The Thousand Suns were the 15th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes during the Great Crusade. They hail from a world called Prospero, a paradise planet with dangerous psychic hunting predators called the Psychnuan. When the Thousand Suns were retaking the galaxy in the name of the Emperor, they believed all knowledge was to be preserved. Xeno libraries were a high priority and to be left undamaged. But the thing that made the Thousand Suns very unusual was that every member had psychic potential, with some having weak potential and other being extremely potent psychers. And many other legions did not trust the psychic abilities and often labeled the Thousand Suns as witches or sorcerers. The legion who opposed the psychic abilities of the Thousand Suns the most were the Death Guard and the Space Wolves. But wouldn't a whole legion of psychers be overpowered? Why were they looked down upon? They should have been the most formidable legion. Well, yes, the Thousand Suns were immensely powerful, but there are huge drawbacks to this power. The legion from its birth has been plagued by the flesh change. What is the flesh change? It is a mutation or curse, depending how you look at it, that haunts every single member of the 15th Legion. And the members of the Legion refer to the flesh change as the flesh running rampant with ambition. Now, how would this occur? Is when those of the Legion delved too deeply or drew too much power from the warp. They would begin to mutate and change into hideous monsters. They would begin to sprout multiple limbs, a host of eyes, feathers, and mouths. When Magnus the Red was rediscovered, the first thing he did was try to save his sons from this curse. He even sacrificed one of his eyes during a bargain to warp entities. And this bargain did halt the flesh change, but only for a time, as when the flesh change later returned, the Space Wolf Legion saw this. They witnessed the monstrosity that a superhuman warrior, an Adeptus Astartes, could become from witchcraft and sorcery. And as I mentioned before, the Space Wolves already did not trust the abilities born from the warp. And this confirmed their beliefs about psychers, and it led to the Thousand Suns to be further ostracized for their use of psychic abilities, eventually leading to the ban of said abilities in the trial called the Council of Nicaea, or often referred to as the Trial of Magnus, and this was held by the Emperor himself, so it was a pretty big deal. And at the beginning of the Horus Heresy, we get to the part where many either think Magnus did nothing wrong or Magnus is an arrogant idiot, as Magnus saw Horus being corrupted and failed to talk him out of it, or was too late. He then went to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal, but how he warned him was drastic, desperate, and went against the previously said banned psychic abilities. Magnus performed a ritual that sent his soul across the stars to Terra, so an astral projection. Terra being the birthplace of humanity and its homeworld, it was heavily guarded, and the Emperor had placed psychic wards to keep the demons of chaos out, and Magnus broke straight through it, and then showed up in front of the Emperor trying to warn him, but then he noticed how everything was on fire and demons started showing up out of nowhere. And another bad thing is Tzeentch, in disguise, offered aid to Magnus to help break through the psychic wards. So Magnus destroyed the Emperor's secret webway project, although the Emperor did hide this from his son, so he had no clue this is what the Emperor was doing. But he did this trying to warn the Emperor of Horus's rebellion, and this led the Emperor to send the Space Wolves, Custodes, and Sisters of Silence to take Magnus into custody, leading to the burning of Prospero, the razing of the Thousand Suns' homeworld. And the Thousand Suns were defeated in this battle, and Magnus the Red was shattered by Leman Russ during their duel. The Thousand Sons had to flee within the Eye of Terror just to survive. Both legions were broken after this battle, and it affected how much they could do during the Horus Heresy. But now let's get back to the flesh change, because during and after the Horus Heresy, the flesh change was still a problem, and the majority of the big name characters for the Thousand Sons died from having to be executed because they had the flesh change. And during the post-heresy, Ahriman, the chief librarian of the Thousand Sons, had enough of the flesh change because him and his cabal casted the rubric of Ahriman. And this was a ritual that worked and failed at the same time, as it affected every member of the Thousand Sons. The flesh change was defeated, but it turned all Thousand Sons legionnaires with weak psychic potential into rubric marines. And rubric marines are trapped souls within armor that have no agency and are akin to automatons that are now controlled by the psychically gifted members of the Legion. And speaking of potent members of the Legion, let's talk about their characters, the few that they have left from the flesh change. We can start with no other than the Crimson King himself, Magnus the Red. Magnus, the most mutated of his brothers, is a powerful psyker, second only to the Emperor. Yes, even stronger than you, Malcador. But Magnus is a philosophical, a mystic, and a scholar of the warp. Magnus is one of the best written Primarchs, as he shares many traits with the Emperor, and this is highlighted in several books. He has the arrogance of the Emperor and his psychic might that gives them a unique bond, and both are shown to soar across the warp together, seeing the birth of stars and worlds. And when Magnus takes to the field, he's able to utterly destroy Titans and destroy the fortifications of Terra itself with that psychic prowess. And he is able to send his soul across the galaxy, as we talked about before. And with his equipment, his battle armor is called the Horned Raiment, a unique suit of artificer armor that was believed to be a physical piece of armor, but was also etheric as well. Magnus could shape this armor at will, and it offered extraordinary protection, even though it looked quite simple. During pre-heresy, Magnus used the Blade of An-Nunura. This weapon was in the shape of a Khopesh, and was a force weapon that combined ancient forgotten lore and imperial tech. And also during the pre-heresy, he used the Psi-Fire Serpenta, which was a handgun that was etheric in nature and seemed to be conjured at will, and was debated if it was a plasma weapon or a psychic weapon. But during post-heresy, Magnus still uses the Horned Raiment, but now he uses the Blade of Magnus, which is still the same blade as before, but now has darker purposes since his fall. The weapon is known to be able to change form and mutate anything it strikes. It can also be used as a staff as well, capable of blasting holes into armor plating with ease. And lastly, Magnus now uses the Crown of the Crimson King, a halo of blazing psychic might that protects Magnus's mind and body from harm, acting as a powerful barrier. And Magnus is just truly a force of nature and was a terrible loss for the Imperium altogether. Magnus' fall to chaos makes the most sense and is the most understandable of the traitors. While some in the community think it's Angron that makes the most sense, but I think Magnus has many more reasons to turn than Angron, because I feel Angron really only has one reason to turn, and that's because he was forced to abandon his people on his homeworld. While Magnus has been hated by his brothers for being psychically gifted, even though the Emperor is too, his sons are dying from a mutation that has no cure. He has had a whole trial against him, the Council of Nicaea, that led to psychic powers being banned entirely, and the burning of Prospero, where his homeworld was burned by the Space Wolves, Sisters of Silence, and Adeptus Custodes. So yeah, Magnus has a lot of reasons to join the other side. But let me know if you guys disagree with that and you guys think Angron or some other Primarch had a better reason to join Horus. But after the burning of Prospero, Magnus was a mess. He was shattered by Leman Russ and he was slowly withering away. And what was left of his legion after the burning had to watch him slowly erode away mentally and physically. And then you have Ahriman, Chief Librarian of Thousand Sons, that led a squad that was sent out to find the shards and were successful. Now, the shards of Magnus' quest can be a little confusing because older lore shows that Magnus is still currently recovering shards well after the Horus Heresy and deep into 40k. And you can see this in Armin the Unchanged book. But newer lore shows that Magnus has only missed one shard, and he believed that it was his noble shard, but Malcador tells him it's just another shard and it's not really a noble aspect or a kind aspect of Magnus, and this is seen in the Fury of Magnus. So Magnus only failed to recover one shard and is not still recovering pieces of today. So just to clear that up, because it's kind of confusing when reading the books. And then we're going to move on to Ahriman, the chief librarian of the Thousand Sons, the favored son of Magnus, the exile, and the unwilling champion of Tzeentch. Now, in the beginning, during 30k and the Great Crusade, Ahriman never believed his legion should rely on psychic abilities as much as they did. He always reminded them that they are Astartes first and Psykers second. And during the Great Crusade, he was pretty down to earth and never looked down on the other legions or the mortals of the Imperium. But sometimes he did grow unconsciously arrogant, and this is shown when he believes an Iron Warrior simply cannot solve a riddle that the Thousand Sons can. But he was shown to realize how arrogant he can be by the Iron Warrior, and he was open to the Iron Warrior's thoughts. Now, Ahriman was the Magister of the Templi of Corvidae. This was a psychic cult within the Thousand Sons that focused on foresight, divination, and predicting the enemy's movements. His powers were not outright destructive like the other cults, like the Pyrite, but they could be. And when he fell to chaos with his legion, he slowly begins to become ruthless and is willing to sacrifice just about anything for knowledge and power, even his own brothers and allies. And Ahriman sacrifices one of his battle captains, Hathor Mott, in order to summon Kairos Fateweaver to help him secure 2 shards of Magnus. And this is just at the beginning, and many more allies and brothers would be used for his own gain. He has 10,000 years of sorceress experience, and he is the strongest Astartes Psyker the Imperium has ever produced. His mastery of sorcery is only matched by greater demons of his dark god Tzeentch. He is able to foresee events that are yet to happen. He is able to unravel an individual's existence. His war gear is the Black Staff of Ahriman, a force weapon that is used to focus for his already potent psychic abilities, and it is composed of several powerful relics. It has the capability of tearing apart reality, and he also uses an infernal bolt pistol. Ahriman's ultimate goal is to undo the rubric he casted upon his brothers. He seeks to find a way to enter the Eldar Black Library. The ancient realm of knowledge could possibly be a key to finding the true means to correct the rubric. But none can truly know if he will be successful, except for perhaps Tzeentch itself. Now, speaking of Tzeentch, we're going to talk about Tzeentch next. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, the changer of ways, the god of psychers, knowledge, hope, ambitions, plots, schemes, and manipulation. Tzeentch has had his hands on the Thousand Sons since their very creation. Tzeentch was the entity that Magnus sacrificed his eye to when they were trying to save his sons. Tzeentch was there when Magnus needed to get past the psychic wards guarding Terra. Tzeentch demons were also there, aiding the Thousand Sons, serving as tutelaries or familiars. Tzeentch was also responsible for the flesh change itself. Tzeentch orchestrated the flesh change to push the Thousand Sons to chaos. Their whole downfall was planned by Tzeentch before Magnus even showed up. And I think this is great writing, as it shows the Thousand Sons were doomed from the beginning, and everything they did was all according to Tzeentch's plan, and Tzeentch has always been pulling the strings. I do find it weird though how the Emperor never tried to help this or try to tell Magnus the truth behind the flesh change, and kind of stuck to how psychic abilities were to blame. I believe this is the best pairing though between Chaos Gods and a Traitor Legion, for as I feel no other god has been there beside his legion the whole time like Tzeentch has been. So let me know if you guys think differently or if you guys agree. Okay, so we talked about the story of the Thousand Sons, their characters, and we talked a little bit about Tzeentch. But what really draws people to the Thousand Sons? In my opinion, I think it's their theme. The Thousand Sons are really unique, unless you're a Necron fan, because they also have the Egyptian theme covered. But the first thing a new 40k fan sees is a high crested helm space marine. They have this Egyptian theme, and with motifs to Egyptian mythology, and characters are stated to have jackal crested helmets, and they have ships with a name like the Photep. And I believe this is what catches the eye of many within the community, or many who are joining the community. And then you have magic, wizards, psychers. This legion is composed of psychers, and you don't have any other legion that's really like this. Most legions are kind of bare bones when it comes to psychic abilities, except 40k Blood Angels. And the abilities that they can do are just kind of ridiculous at times. You have legionnaires who are using astral projection and using their warp forms that can also be various different shapes and sizes to destroy enemy aircraft. And they can also read people's minds and predict the future. That just sounds crazy compared to other legions who are used to using like physical weapons and physical means to destroy their enemy. But this is also just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the psychic abilities that they can use. Other legions have psychers, but their books just don't show them off the same way the Thousand Sons books do. And I think this is what really pulls people into the Thousand Sons, because there is no other legion like them. And this is what leads me to think about how GW has handled the Thousand Sons. Because I think GW has done a pretty good job at handling the Thousand Sons, in my opinion. It's not perfect, for I feel they could use some more units on the tabletop and a few more characters besides just Magnus and Ahriman. And I know we got the new automatons, but they have received mixed feedback from the community, and it is a kind of odd choice to give them. But they were the villains of Space Marine 2, which is the first time they've been featured in a really big way, and it was a big game, a really successful game, and a big piece of media. And they were also the first Monogod Legion released all the way back in 2016, almost 10 years ago now. And I think the writing for Magnus is generally good, but I do think he loses a little bit too much when he is supposed to be the second strongest psyker, and he usually gets double teamed or triple teamed, but that's just my little bias in there. But I think GW has done a pretty good job at showing love to the Thousand Sons. Ahriman also has a lot of books, so there's just a lot of lore to dive into when you want to learn about the Thousand Sons. But in conclusion, I think the Thousand Sons are a really unique legion, and they have a lot of great lore to back it up. Magnus and Ahriman are really unique characters, and they're complex. They change from 30k to 40k. Tzeentch is also really well written. He doesn't really suffer from the same problems that Slaanesh suffers from, and he's really well incorporated into the story of the Thousand Sons. And GW, they've shown pretty good lore to Thousand Sons, and I do appreciate how Magnus was the first Primarch released. But let me know if you guys like the Thousand Sons, if your Team Magnus did nothing wrong, or Team Magnus is an arrogant idiot. I am planning another Thousand Sons video after this, so expect more from the Sons of Magnus soon. Thank you guys for watching, and take care.